Hello, and welcome to The Fool and the Philosopher.
The Philosopher and the Fool. I'll have a quick story.
Okay.
So, last night, I'm in bed. I'm sleeping away happily. It's about 3 a.m. And then a little band sets itself up on the hot tub outside. And they start singing. And I wake up terrified as two coyotes are singing a duet right next to the house. And it was the creepiest thing, and my heart was just pounding. It's like, it's just coyotes. But it didn't sound like coyotes because they kept it very consistent, like a very consistent sort of singing. It's like, wait, no, they can do that. They can do any sounds. It's just...
Did you look out the window?
No.
Okay, because I've been thinking about coyote howls, right?
Yeah.
I have seen, and I'm sure you have too, a lot of coyotes in my life.
Yeah.
And I've seen coyotes even up very close. I have heard a lot of coyotes in my life. I have never seen and heard a coyote at the same time. So, what that makes me wonder...
Or imagine making the noise.
Is that actually a coyote I'm hearing? Or have I just been told that's what coyotes sound like?
Well, what I said on the hot tub is I went outside this morning and I saw their tracks on the hot tub.
But... what if it's not coyotes whatsoever? Like, what if it's, Bigfoot or something? What if it's an entirely different creature that makes those noises?
Well, that's part of the reason why it freaked me out is it wasn't the chaotic yipping of the coyotes. It was a howl with a giggle afterwards, and a howl with a giggle afterwards. And there's this very consistent giggle, very consistent howl each time. They did about 5 of them.
There's some of the creepier animals out there.
Yeah.
The other one that I think is really creepy is the... silver tree fox, I think it's called. It's a kind of fox that climbs trees.
Yeah.
And they also sound very creepy. We don't have them here, but I've heard them. And there's some birds that make some creepy sounds, but yeah, coyotes are up there.
It's not a pleasant thing to be woken up by when it's so close.
And there's probably some monkeys that are scary sounding, but...
Oh, howler monkeys. Getting woken up by howler monkeys sends you into a bit of a confusion.
Yeah,
You're out camping in an area, and they say there's pumas in the area. You're a little concerned about them. Then you get woken up by the howler monkey, and you think the puma's trying to get in your tent.
Yeah, I had a friend, he was in... where was he? Guatemala, maybe? And he was on top of some, ruin. And it's just... it was basically a park all around it, so there's not going to be any animals there. But way off in the distance, echoing through the hills, you can just hear, wow!
Yeah.
He had a little video of it. I kind of... yeah, so... and kookaburras are kind of creepy sounding, I guess, but...
they can get pretty creepy. Especially if you don't... elks, that's a creepy one.
Yeah. Yeah, there's... But yeah, I don't know if coyotes actually make that sound or not. I've seen videos of coyotes making those sounds,
well, that's part of what scared me, is it didn't sound like the coyote sounds I've heard before, but I was pretty certain it's a coyote, because foxes don't howl. They make a lot of noises, but they don't howl. And I would have been more comfortable, honestly, with a wolf howling out there.
There's something... there's creepy sounds, but then when you get to animals like wolves and tigers...
yeah.
I haven't heard a tiger, but I've heard tigers are like this. Yeah. Wolves, when they howl, it's not just the sound. The sound itself isn't that scary, but it does something to my heart. It makes my heart, go boom, drop.
Yeah, I'd rather have the primordial fear of a wolf than not knowing if it's a coyote or not, because it doesn't sound like coyotes I've heard before. Because I was more creepy. It's could be a coyote, or is it some... I was looking up jackal howls, because it's or hyenas, because I wasn't certain. It's how would they be up here? The only things howling would be dogs, coyotes, or wolves, because foxes don't howl. I even tried to look up fox howls. There's no fox howls. They make a lot of noises, but not howls. And so I had to conclude it was a coyote.
Well, a raven probably could.
A raven could have
or
done
a person.
That. Yeah, some people can do really good wolf howls, but there's no boot prints out there near enough for it to be a person.
Yeah, and that would be a lot scarier.
Oh, yeah.
Just some people on the hot tub howling at the moon.
Remember that creepy story, which is Humans Lick 2?
Yeah, with I remember that thing all the time.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm trying to sleep. Well, tonight's going to be fun. I try to forget that often.
Yeah, well...
all those, kid stories that the kids tell each other, they all stuck with me so much, and I think of them all the time at the most inopportune times.
I have a ridiculously big bed, right?
Yeah.
And I don't move much in my sleep. From like when I'm actually asleep, I don't move around all that much. I sort of stay in one patch. Because it's such a big bed, this night was one of the particulars where I got up, grabbed the sword, and put it on the bed next to me to help me get back to sleep. It's like a safety blanket sword.
Yeah.
And because I have the loner swords now from the sword fighting club, it was an actual solid steel longsword instead of a fancy katana or Chinese practice sword. So
Yeah, a bit of self-defense isn't bad. Baseball bat, sword, kind of the same idea.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no, one of the things that really annoyed me about was like, why now of all nights? Because I was like, I've been not getting enough sleep lately, so I went to bed at like 10:30, then like, oh, I want to get to sleep, and so you start like tossing and turning. So I figure I probably got to bed around 11:30, but that's still better than I've been doing. And then the stupid coyote wake me up, and then I fall back to bed. And of course, because of that disturbance in my sleep, I wanted to like get up around 7. I wake up at 9:45 because I had my sleep messed up.
well, the most important thing and the coyotes, there can always be disruptions to your sleep, right? And so the most important thing you can do is always get up at the same time, because then you don't have troubles getting to sleep, or you have less troubles getting to sleep.
Yeah.
And it's also a regularity that really helps you.
Yeah. I'm trying to work towards waking up at 7.
Well, if you're able to get up at 9,
Yeah.
then maybe you should be getting up at 9 consistently, as long as you're consistent.
When I fall asleep properly, like actually have sleep not interrupted, I naturally wake up at 6:37.
Because I found that, especially with the time zone here, rising,
With the sun.
well, closer to the sun, because we're 2 hours off of the sun. So
Yeah.
if you think you're a person that gets up at 7, getting up at 9 and going to bed at 12:30, let's say, is more in line with the sun than going to bed at 10:30 and waking up at 7.
Yeah. I've also found that I always feel better with the 11 o'clock waking up at 7. Like, I feel better waking up at 7 than waking up at 9.
There's just I think clocks were kind of a bad idea. So before...
Right, you're just going full return to monkey, aren't you?
Well, I don't know if you know this, but before clocks were invented, sorry, not clocks exactly, but before precision timekeeping devices were invented, that could keep accuracy when traveling.
Yeah.
Each village had its own time.
Yeah.
So if you went to a village that was just slightly further west, they would be off by 3 or 4 minutes from your village. And that worked for everyone because everything on Earth except humans basically train the rhythms to the sun, and maybe like some animals in like troglodyte type animals in deep caves.
Yeah.
They follow the rhythms to the sun.
Well, one of the weird things about sleep that I found is people actually, like, much older, didn't even sleep for 8 hours.
I've heard that. I don't know if that's true or not. And even if it was true, that doesn't mean much, because if we're saying Victorian era people did this, or Georgian era people did this, or medieval era people did this, that could have been a blip that wasn't something that occurred. Because when you think of in terms of evolution, you're talking tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years.
Yeah.
They figure that people, 200,000 years ago were basically identical to people we have today.
Yes.
So you're not going to be getting, just because, let's say, people have been doing something for 1,000 years, it doesn't mean that that is natural or better by any means.
Well, I also think with the whole thing of the villages having their each individual times, I think it's also still individual person to person of that sleep.
And if you look at...
Because I know some people, like very few, who are actual night owls, and they operate very well as night owls, and they don't operate on a light time schedule.
If you look at like a wolf in captivity, you can... Now, age isn't necessarily the marker of success or health or happiness or anything like that, but a wolf in captivity can very easily get to, 5 years old, 10 years old, that type of thing. Whereas a wolf in the wild, they typically... 5 is kind of an old wolf, 3 is more of an average wolf.
Well, actually, a really good example of this, even more so, is Yellowstone National Park. Because it has a very interesting thing with its wolves, which is they are the only predators in the park, and there are a lot of deer in the park. And so those wolves, only danger to themselves is that they're wolves. And the oldest wolf in the world actually lives in the park, so it's not in captivity. And it got, I think it was 12 years old or something. And a lot of the wolves in Yellowstone Park live very long time.
So, and wolves, they can like get, still deer and elk can still end up killing them because you get kicked and
your ribs are broken.
Your ribs are broken, and that makes you a little bit slower next time. And so you get a bit more injured and a bit more injured and a bit more injured, and eventually your body just breaks down, or you can't keep up, or you starve to death, or whatever it might be. Basically, you get abandoned and then you die. Mm-hmm. And so you can also say that living historically isn't necessarily living your best life.
Yeah.
But what I do think living your best life is living in accordance, not with when we look at history, of course, what we're doing is we're trying to figure out what people did by default, what they did naturally. Yeah. But I think you can listen to yourself and do what comes naturally as well.
Yeah.
And like you said, people are going to be different. Maybe there is night owls. Maybe there's people that do prefer staying up in the night. But there's so many people. There's got to be a few out there, I guess. I'm not sure how many there are. I'm also not sure about... I think a lot of conditions are people that are actually just very resilient rather than it benefiting them. So I think there's people that can just handle crazy life. Like, you look at... it's kind of a unrelated example, but you look at someone like Destiny, like the YouTuber, and StarCraft player, and he lives a lifestyle that is incredibly unhealthy. He seeks drama, and he lives off a high constantly of being in dramatic situations, and that is not a healthy way to be. And he's also in an open relationship, which isn't healthy for most people. Yeah. And he seems so far to be holding up, and he says he loves it and he couldn't stop, and that seems to me like a very resilient addict. Like, they're smokers. I had a friend, his grandparents both lived into their late 90s, and they smoked like every day of their life, basically. Yeah. And that doesn't mean smoking was good for them. It means that they were... Well, maybe smoking was good to them and that it allowed them to relax, and maybe that did account for their health, but...
I was hearing about Churchill's ridiculous lifestyle, and someone tried to live like Churchill, and it wrecked them. He drank so much alcohol, and he could operate during a war.
But he wasn't a very healthy guy, was he?
No, he wasn't healthy, but he was operatable. Like, he could actually live and command a whole country during a war. And the guy who tried to live his lifestyle is not trying to command a war. He's just trying to, like, get through his day while living Churchill's lifestyle. And, like, throughout the week, he just got worse and worse and worse and, like, stopped because it was killing him.
Well, I think most people are very resilient, and you'll see this with things like caffeine and sugar, where most people have large amounts of caffeine, large amounts of sugar, large amounts of processed food is kind of given the wrong idea because, sliced bread is a processed food, but the slicing isn't really... Well, it is adding, who knows how often that machinery is cleaned and all that sort of stuff. But so every bit of processing is adding another weakness to the link of... it's more efficient for these slicing machines to be lubricated with machine oil or something. Like you do see food companies making these concessions, like they irradiate beef and they used to spray them down with bleach, I think, like packs of beef when they to sterilize them. Yeah, I think it was bleach. They would like wash over the surface of beef. I think it was bleach. It might have been. I think it was bleach, but I'm not 100%. But seed oils are a huge one, where most seed oils, like look up a video of canola oil being made, you have a machine that is processing. You're squeezing blood from a stone. There isn't really oil in canola. Like canola actually is a fairly oily seed as it goes. But what they do is you can get about 75% of the oil just by squeezing it, and you're like, okay, that's great. But then they take that pulp and they go crazy on it with all sorts of chemical baths and heating and reheating, and essentially it causes the entire process, it causes the oil to spoil. There's actually a process in processing seed oils where they heat them again because they're spoiled to get rid of the smell so that people actually will buy them. Yeah. And And seed oils aren't, or like canola oil isn't even as crazy as cottonseed oil, because cottonseed oil is actually a byproduct of extracting cotton, and they just had all this industrial waste, and they were like, wait, we can crystallize this and sell it as like a fat substitute.
Well, on the note of they get rid of the smell of off oil, if you've ever had an oil product that has gone off and you smell that, like, stale oil is so repulsive. Like, it's...
Well, all you have to do is heat it, and the processing for processing oil involves heating it a lot.
Like, it smells so bad. It's like makes you feel physically ill.
So, I'm not an expert. All fat, but this is what I recall. All fats contain within them a toxic component that, or a potentially toxic component, but it doesn't bind with, I think it's oxygen, and become toxic unless it's exposed to enough heat. And to make all seed oils to make all seed oils, there's a lot of heat involved in the process, because the amount of heat you need to make these things go rancid is not much. Like, it's the kind of amount of heat you might need just by squeezing something, because that pressure will produce heat. So, some of the only oils that don't cause this to happen, I think, and I'm not even sure about avocado oil, but cold pressed olive oil is, as far as I'm aware, the only oil that doesn't go rancid. And that's cold pressed olive oil, not all olive oil, because there is olive oil processing where they do squeeze it rapidly, and that causes it to heat and go off. And I think olive oil actually, most seed oils go rancid at fairly low temperatures.
Yeah, and exposure to light.
Including olive oil.
Yeah.
And
that's why the green glass for olive oil.
Yeah, to filter the light. So olive oil processing. Now look up a video of olive oil manufacturing. Yeah. It's very soothing, actually, because they stick them in these giant stone mills that slowly, like very slowly to avoid it getting hot, grind it. And then they wrap it in hemp, and they gently squeeze the hemp, and oil just pours out of it. Like, if you compare that to the canola oil, they have like this sticky paste, and then they run it through these grates.
Well, one of the things that was... So the sticky paste is actually the byproduct of them crushing to get the oil, but then they take that sticky paste and they boil it.
Yeah, and they just try to get every last bit out of it. I think canola oil could be way healthier if they just stopped at the... Like, if they chucked 25% of the product, I think you could get a much healthier product.
Yeah.
But even then, the sheer industrial power you need to get in even the good, in quotation marks, canola oil is on such a scale. Olive oil, you can grab an olive and squeeze it. Like, you can pick an olive from a tree, put it down, and you can grab a rock and you can press it, and you will get olive oil. They're very oily. Like, canola oil, you can go to a canola field and pick it and squeeze it. You do get a bit of oil. It is very oily as well. But and then corn oil is ridiculous. It's like 75 grams of corn for 1 gram of oil or something.
Well, one of the other different things with the olives compared to a lot of the other oils is olive, you're getting it partly from the seed, but you're also getting it from the fruit. And plants don't like their seeds being eaten. And seeds are generally more toxic than plant flesh.
Right, that's not even the processing you're talking about then.
Yeah, no, this is just the fact that a lot of seed oils are concentrated seeds.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the problems with...
and most seeds are toxic.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure... Like, humans are omnivores, right? Like, we can eat seeds. But yeah, if you take corn, let's say, we can eat corn and we're mostly fine, I think. But when you condense 75 grams of corn into 1 gram... If you're condensing that toxic part, like, for example, I eat a huge amount of squash in my diet. Squash is actually toxic. If you eat, I think the amount is roughly 1 squash per day. That can cause all sorts of problems for you. It can make your hair fall out and all sorts of other stuff. But the thing about squash is it's massive.
Yeah.
So you don't tend to eat a single squash per day. But if
they're small squashes,
if you grow a squash and it doesn't get enough water, it can be quite small, and then you can eat one of those in an entire sitting. Because basically, the difference between a big squash and a small squash, there's not much different in terms of the structure of it. It's just water.
Yeah.
But the
water and more fiber, right?
Possibly the toxin though is basically there from the beginning. It doesn't produce more of it, from what I understand.
Well, it's probably from the initial seed.
Could be
of the blend.
It could be. So I think with a lot of seeds, like if you eat a handful of sunflower seeds, that's totally different from.
So one of the things that I find interesting is popcorn, right? So popcorn kernels are actually quite different than the things that for corn. But you take, like, I don't know, 100 popcorn kernels. That's like, it fits in your hand.
Yeah.
It's a very small amount. And then you heat that up, and it's like massive, the amount of popcorn you get out of that. And you can eat those, and you can be quite happy with that.
Yeah.
And then cornmeal.
Yeah.
Basically, imagine grinding that all into a dust, and then mixing it with, like, I don't know, water. So it's only doubled in volume instead of how much popcorn is. Then think about, all right, a cornmeal, like, thing.
Yeah.
Like how
but then
much...
you get into, like, corn syrup and to corn oil, and it's...
Yeah.
You're
that's
condensing it massively. Yeah. So the other aspect of the rancidity of oils, all fats go rancid from oxygen, from what I understand, is the component that binds with oxygen to become rancid. You have different amounts of it in different oils. And I'm trying to remember, I think avocado oil and olive oil have quite a bit less. Like it's like a quarter as much or something as as seed oils.
Yeah.
So even if you had both and they're both 100% rancid, the avocado oil or the olive oil is going to be going to contain less of this toxin in it. Now,
rancid animal fat must have a ton of it.
No? It's like 100th the amount of like seed oils.
But it'll have botulism.
Well, it'll have all sorts of other issues. Yeah, but because I think most oils are antibacterial.
Yeah.
But animal fat isn't.
And you need a very small amount of botulism to kill you.
So most oils probably aren't going to get like bacteria in them.
Yeah.
But fat, so there's always different issues.
Yeah.
But the rancidity doesn't come from aging, it comes from heating. So the issue here is heating. So if you heat all of these things too much, and they each have a different level where they become rancid.
Yeah.
And I think olive oils might actually be the lowest. Like I think it might be one of the more sensitive ones to heating. And I think, but I don't remember.
Well, olive oil turns to smoke really fast.
It doesn't.
It starts smoking anyways.
No, it doesn't. So most oils have something called a flash point, right?
Yeah.
Where they, that's when they turn rancid, basically, or it's the point after where they instantly vaporize and start smoking. From what I understand, olive oil's flash point is actually higher than its evaporation point. So when you see olive oil in a pan smoking, in quotation marks, you're actually seeing it evaporating.
Oh.
But I did see something recently about the release of some sort of nitrous gas from different oils, and olive oils is comparable to other oils. And this is in relation to asthma. So there's always... So even, I guess... vaporized olive oil might not be great for you.
So what was that thing earlier saying is a mistake?
Time?
Yeah, keeping time is a mistake. Cooking's a mistake.
Frying, like baking, I think is baking's beneficial because it kills a lot of what
about open fire? Is that frying, like the open fire?
No, frying is literally the caramelization through like a extremely high heat to it. Like you can bake in a frying pan as long as you keep the heat low.
Yeah, well, that's because you over open fire.
Yeah, well, it depends what the open fire is. If it's coals and you have like a grill, that's not going to be frying.
Yeah.
But if you have like a metal pan that has really high fast heat transfer in the open fire and you chuck something in, that's going to fry it. And if you have something on a stick and you're modulating the temperature, that could probably go anywhere.
Yeah.
But I think that, animal fats, they take a very high temperature to go rancid. And this isn't, from what I understand, this isn't olive oil goes rancid at 88 degrees C. Animal fat goes rancid at 100 degrees C. It's a, what's that called? Reactivity. So you know how if you chuck a brick of gunpowder into a fire, it'll burn slowly. But if you chuck like a handful of gunpowder dust into a fire, it'll explode.
Yeah.
Well, a brick of gunpowder probably would too, but you know what I mean. The higher surface area you have, the more chance you have for things to go wrong.
It's throwing a handful of flour into the air versus like a solid block of flour.
But basically, these are all chances. So your olive oil is still going to go rancid even on a low temperature, just slower because there's less chance of it happening over and over.
Yeah.
And animal fat has a very low chance of going rancid, and even if it does go rancid, it is a very it has far less of this toxin than others of this ilk.
You are listening to The Fool and the Philosopher.
It's much nicer for editing if you have two mics, because then you can make one person completely silent if they interrupted someone.
Yeah.
And you can also reorder things a little bit better, space them out a little better.
Yeah.
It's much easier to hear what's going on.
It's much easier to make someone say something and make them seem a fool.
Unless the Yogscast are the best performers on Earth. When they're doing TTT with 8 people, they are cutting out like 90% of the conversations.
Oh, yeah.
And you also see this with Soviet Womble, where I don't think he actually edits the audio, but he brings what conversation he wants you to focus on to the fore.
Yeah.
And then he subtitles it so you're not paying attention to the other conversations, even though there's a massive amount of conversations. I watched an interesting video where someone showed one of his clips without subtitling, and it was an incomprehensible mess. It's actually really impressive that he's able to make it understandable.
Brings you to that focus.
But when you have 8 people all trying to be entertaining at once, or just all being excited at once, then you get like I've seen groups of people, like groups of 8 people where nobody's talking, and it's kind of weird. And that can be quiet. But when you have 8 entertainers all getting excited, then that's going to be unfollowable unless they're cutting out people and reordering storylines and structures. And so the editing becomes quite an art. But we do less editing here, so...
Well, one of the funny things with Soviet Womble is in the early videos, a lot of other people are excited, but they weren't entertainers. And because of him, other people started streaming and being entertainers. And so over time, he's collecting more entertainers, but also more of them becoming entertainers. And so it makes more of them more obnoxious.
Well, not necessarily.
Not obnoxious, but...
Well, because I think a lot of people who become entertainers, they were boisterous people to begin with. Now, you see some people like Pangaea Panga, who he's just incredibly talented at something. And then people were watching him so much that became his job, where he started playing Mario, and that was his job. There is people like that are just extreme talents. And there's people who want to be YouTubers, I think, that maybe they aren't naturally boisterous and outgoing and whatnot, that are just... They're working really hard at it. So that they do exist. But I think that the reason Soviet Womble was able to record his friends in the first place, and the reason the Yogscast was able to record their friends, like Lewis was able to record his friends in the first place, was because they were a very loud, engaging group of people that were actually performing feedback with each other and not just being kind of silent and strange.
Yeah. Well, it's weird because with Dota, we play against a lot of different teams. And one of the teams we play against, they're all incredibly talented. And you sort of recognize it. It's like, oh, it's this group. And one of their members started streaming recently. And I was watching one of their first streams he did. It's like, yeah, you guys are all quite good at the game, but your level of talking is so small. Like, even the guy who's streaming, they're very light talkers. And then I watched a different stream, which someone had, and everyone is very talkative. And these people are streamers who play Dota. They're not as good as the other team, but it's like just the difference of, oh, let's try it. And then it's like, so
yeah.
level.
Well, I think the people that tend to succeed are the ones that are actually... It's not the best players.
Yeah.
Like, you look at... I'm trying to think of a good example. Well, you look at, like, the Yogscast playing a game compared to, like, Quill 18 playing a game.
Yeah.
Quill 18 is really talented at, like, RimWorld and Europa Universalis and Aurora 4X and Dwarf Fortress and Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup. But the Yogscast is way bigger than him.
Yeah.
Because if you want to go to someone to see how they play, then you go to him. And if you want to go to someone to be entertained, you go to the Yogscast. And the Yogscast even has members that are very skilled, like Duncan, at various things.
Yeah.
But Duncan seems to have abandoned that in favor of focusing on being more entertaining, which I think is the right choice if that's his job.
Well, there's even an interesting thing of they do speed runs of Mario Kart, like a certain group of them, and after a certain point, when they get frustrated enough that they keep messing up their speed runs, they'll say, okay, I have to stop speaking to the chat because they're live streaming it. I need to focus on the game. And they actually get quieter and become less of an entertainer because they're focusing so much on the speed run.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you want to... Yeah, because talking is going to engage part of your brain.
I feel like it cuts your available brain power in half, actually.
Depends on the person and how you're doing it and why you're doing it. Like, I have troubles thinking unless I'm talking. So it probably increases my brain power to be talking. But if I were to provide commentary, that might be different, man.
Yeah. Well, talking to a person, I think you can still do stuff talking person, but having to talk to the void.
Right, but if I'm not muttering to myself, I have troubles, like, working through a problem.
I'll say, like a friend of mine. Or he's like you.
Well, I used to have people get angry at me in math class because I would be muttering all the questions to myself. And I used to have people that would like that and would sit near me.
Well, so this one friend, he's probably one of the better Dota players I know. And when he's quite quiet when he's doing the muttering, but if you're playing the game and you're in the same room as him and you're both playing, he starts talking and sometimes it's picked all night. And the more seriously he's in the game, the more he starts muttering. And you're just like, what on earth is going on with him?
And I have troubles. I have troubles playing like testing my role-playing game by myself if I'm not talking. I've noticed that when my voice is more sore, I can't test the game because I can't mutter like goblin screams and whatnot, and it actually helps me focus. I need them to be. And I used to get into these states when I was a little kid. I remember when I was playing with toys. And I would start talking or stop talking. I'm not sure, because what I would notice was that I'd gotten so focused on playing with the toys, I'd gone into like another world basically, and I wasn't sure if I had been talking or imagining the talking, and I still don't know what I was doing. But
and then you see either a parent or a sibling watching you, and you get hit by a wave of self-consciousness.
Yeah. If someone like comes in and like breaks the spell, and you're like, "What am I doing? Where was I?"
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, and it didn't happen all the time. Like sometimes, I was playing with toys not for that experience. It just sometimes you fell so far into it that they would happen. And then I think there's probably, I don't know. Actually, I was gonna say like someone like Mr. Samuel Streamer. He might just be really trying to keep talking even though he's not
he's editing a lot.
He's editing a lot, like he's condensing hours into minutes.
Yeah.
But he also does seem to get invested in the lives of his RimWorld characters and talks to them. And I remember distinctly one episode where he was shouting at them and they left or something. He's like, "Wait, please don't go. I talk to you more than my friends." And then he's like, "Wait, oh, I actually do. I talk to these people more than anyone in my life. I talk to them more than my girlfriend."
What are those things called? The
pawns?
Yeah, pawns. He talks to the pawns.
Yeah, well, he had this moment of realization where he spends more time talking to and caring about the lives of these imaginary little people than people in his life. I don't know if it's a good business model, because I think a large part of the attraction to his channel is watching him suffer and watching his insanity, and that can't be healthy for him.
No.
And
well, what's that weird thing? The guy who decided to go completely sane.
Oh, J-Reg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the entertainment from his channel is he's insane.
But
is it an act or is it not?
Well, he's very much a irony type humor guy. So he's getting the humor from being ironic in the fact that he's being a normal person, even there. I was thinking about like the internet and how, not the internet itself, but people who are really on the internet.
Yes.
Like us, I think, to a degree.
Yeah.
Where you don't watch YouTube, and I think more and more people, because I would include into this group even people that spend half an hour a day looking at cat videos on Facebook or something like that.
Yeah.
Where you start becoming part of this imaginary world there's a word for it, isn't it? Like a collective. It's like a collective consciousness. This almost like a meta reality. It's like
alt space
where people go and they start interacting with this world and they stop acting like humans. And like I think that J-Reg's, especially his ironic humor, is a complete abandonment of humanity, because you're saying that there is humor to be derived in being healthy and fulfilled, and looking at that as, you say, like you know, talk about normies and people who don't understand how very important it is that Elon Musk has bought Twitter, or something like that. This imaginary person that lives on your screen from a made-up place called Australia is talking about their favorite pretend card game that's on their computer, and it matters to you. And I think this can happen without a computer. It can happen because, how did this happen?
Adventure novels.
Well, books. Yeah, it can happen with books.
Well, I'm thinking about adventure novels in Victorian times. So there's these guys...
Right, to escape into these...
Yeah, but the adventure novels were written about the guys' journeys to Australia or Africa or North America.
Yeah.
And they embellished a lot of the details. But that even matter. You got to live in this fantasy land.
But even more than that, I noticed I was in my room and I had the electric heat on. And then I left my room and the dog ran up to me. And it was cold outside of my room. And my room was like an artificial world without predators running and attacking my feet. And it was warm and cozy there.
I like how you think that the dog's a predator.
Well, it was late one night, right? And I was like, I went to the bathroom and she like charged at me and started barking like, rah, rah, rah. She can do this really creepy bark. And she's like this pitch black pit bull. And so she charges you in the middle of the night and barking. You're like, whoa! Slam the door behind me, hide in the bathroom. And I was thinking, why do we invite predators into our house? Like, we have locks that no other animal can get through. And then we bring them into the house.
One of the things no other animals can get through. I'm really scared of bears.
Well, bear can go through the door, but...
Yeah.
But they're not going to, though, most of the time.
Well, you know what's annoying, actually, on bears, and not going to go through it, is for a while now I've actually started having dreams about Bigfoot. And one of the concepts that really scares me, and it's sort of having dreams, is an arm coming through the window.
Well, there was that story about the Bigfoot that punched through a window.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm on a ground floor as well, and that just adds to it.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you do in that case? Like,
you get grabbed by Bigfoot.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm far enough away from the window, I'd have to have a really long arm. But...
The Bible has the line that the evils of the today are sufficient therein. So I think what you do when a Bigfoot punches through the window is you get grabbed by Bigfoot and you figure it out from there.
Yeah. I was thinking, like, well, the situation sort of thing is a lot of people, like, Bigfoot isn't real.
Okay.
So that it's vampires aren't real.
I want to talk about that because
werewolves aren't real. So just let me follow this line of logic. So,
well, werewolves too are, but
Negalashi isn't real.
Can you choose something that isn't real?
Skinwalkers aren't real.
How about
dragons aren't real?
Okay, that one I can go a bit more with.
The dragon makes this more difficult. Okay. Because it has to be on the semi-edge of believable.
Right.
So, this thing's trying to get into your house.
Yeah.
And so you call the police for help.
Yeah.
Do you lie to them to get them to come help you, but then will they be underprepared?
So you say...
It's like, hello, police, there's a Bigfoot trying to break into my house.
I think...
Would they still send a patrol because maybe it's like, oh, it's a bear attacking or a person that's just big?
Yeah, I think they would still come to help. Like, well, unless they were really ticked off that you were wasting their time. But I think if you sounded scared enough, you said, no, please get... this isn't a joke. I don't know what's going on.
You need to send something.
Because I think most people are aware. I think most people have a degree of humility. There could be a Bigfoot. There could be a man in a giant Bigfoot costume. There could be... there could be a bear. It could be whatever. It could be a gorilla. It could be a mutant gorilla that's like 6 feet tall or something,
Yeah.
or 8 feet tall or whatever a big gorilla is. Gorillas are pretty big, so I don't know how big they actually are.
Well, gorillas aren't super tall. They're like only about 6 feet tall.
Well, I read once they're 5 feet tall, but then I saw a video of a gorilla charging a guy,
Yeah.
and the gorilla hunched over looked taller than the guy. So I don't know what to believe now. I don't know how big
I think
a
they're
gorilla
about like
actually is.
6 feet tall, like standing up.
Like this thing looked like if it stood up, it'd be 8 feet tall. So I don't know how big a gorilla is.
They've got pretty stubby back legs.
And they're also that is true. They're basically upright already.
Yeah.
And the other thing is,
The more thing about a gorilla is it's like, what, 4 feet across at the shoulders?
yeah. Well, the other their entire body's their torso.
Yeah.
And the other thing about a gorilla is, their size range is massive. Like they can be for like 200 to 500 pounds.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, like with their size, like they're actually tops. Like, have you ever seen a gorilla spin? It's hilarious, and they can just do that because their body's basically a giant top.
yeah, because they look like Kronk. They have
Yeah.
tiny little legs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that is true. 'Cause, the video I saw, the gorilla charged the guy, and it looked bigger than him, and it was like still curled over. It wasn't. I don't even know if gorillas can stand upright.
Well, they can raise their arms.
Yeah. And so
And if a gorilla's raising his arms overhead, his shoulder's like a foot across, and like their biceps are huge.
So you just give a gorilla legs and you have Bigfoot, really.
Yeah,
Like-
and that's scary.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine a gorilla that doesn't skip leg day?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. It's probably too far divergent, but like you cross a gorilla with a human and you've got Bigfoot. Like, and those might exist or something like that. Like in
Well, have you ever seen
Peru, they have the hairy man, right?
Well, have you seen recreations of Gigantopithecus?
No, maybe. What's a gigantopithecus? Kind of anteater.
So, in the range of beliefs of what Bigfoot is, some people believe Bigfoot is Gigantopithecus didn't go extinct. It's a giant Asian ape.
Right.
They're not gorillas, they're apes, but they're huge.
Right. So it's like a Yeti type creature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like 9, 8 feet tall, really long arms.
Well, you hear the stories about the natives in Alaska that they fought the men with the long tails, and
Yeah.
you think there probably was primates at one point in North America. Well, in North America, and the question is, are they still around? I guess.
Well, even on this range, do you know about the pygmies?
Like people or
Yeah, people, humans.
are you talking about like alive today or
Yeah.
like in Africa the 4 foot tall people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's a group of people that are just divergent.
Yeah.
And like
Well,
super divergent.
Not really. People genetically are not very divergent. Even even the African. There's Africans that have like red skin, and there's Africans that are tiny, and there's Africans that have very weirdly shaped heads compared to basically every other human on Earth, and they're still very similar to humans.
Yeah, they're very
genetically.
similar.
The most diverse humans are Tasmanians, and there's no pureblood Tasmanians left anymore because the island was conquered and most of them died, and then the others married out or died out. So they were the most diverse, was the Tasmanians, and now it's probably like the Sentinelese or something. Or
Yeah, what if there's like, I mean, giant natives?
yeah,
Well, that's actually one of the things that they called them was there's a tribe of giant natives.
the Naha people
Yeah.
in the Nahanni Valley were, they were just people that were incredibly violent and large and hairy, and that doesn't mean they're humans though.
Yeah, well, one of the other one, the Saidakai,
In Ontario, I think.
I don't know what, they're in some mountain region.
Oh, okay.
It's in between the States and Canada.
Yeah.
But they're basically these group of cannibal giants that apparently lived in one area, and the local natives of that land had a war with the cannibal giants, and it's very actually similar to a lot of stories. They trapped them in their cave and then killed all of them.
Yeah.
And some explorers were in the area, and they found a cave with giant skeletons in it.
So
And they're like these huge heads, and if you were to put the skeleton together, these would be like 8 foot, 9 foot tall people.
So if Bigfoot punches through your window and grabs you,
Yeah.
what you do is you say, "Hey, buddy, this hasn't gone well in the past. I don't think you want to start this war because we'll finish it." Because you hear these stories about
But he punches through and grabs your foot. Can I have a salty?
there is maybe hippos are the only one I can think of that are still like doing okay. But basically every monster from human past and legend is dead.
Yeah.
Even within our legendary stories, we kill them.
Yeah.
Like, you talk about how Grendel was this horrifying beast that could slay like 100 warriors, and Beowulf tears him limb from limb.
Yeah.
Like, and you see the long-tailed monkeys.
Yeah.
They were wiped out for, like, they're completely extinct.
The wolves of
The wolves
of England were murdered.
Most of the wolves in Europe were all killed.
Yeah.
You have bears. Their population numbers are dwindling.
Wasn't there actually native lions in London or England?
Yes, but
like there's some sort of native big cat that they basically wiped out.
Yeah.
The Romans did, I think.
Maybe, because there was in Europe, there was definitely
Yeah.
the lions in Europe that the Romans wiped out. There was lions in the UK, but I believe that they think those were extinct before humans got to the UK.
Oh, okay.
Because I remember looking...
Did they have bears in the UK?
Yes.
They killed off all the bears.
Yeah, they killed all the
Like, they had
bears.
a different species of bear, didn't they? Because the brown bear and the black bear are North American. They had, like, some European bear.
I think it might have been a brown bear, but yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah, like the UK basically killed all its predators.
Yeah.
And there's stories, I don't know if they're true, about St. Patrick getting rid of all the snakes.
Yeah.
And there isn't terrifying creatures that get to stay around. So, but you mentioned vampires as a thing that doesn't exist. I just learned this like 3 days ago, but because I've been researching vampires a lot recently. And there was a massive war against vampires in the 18 or 1700s in the Holy Roman Empire. And there was vampire outbreaks everywhere.
I know some stories about, not this case, like 1800 vampire outbreaks.
But like all throughout Austria and the Holy Roman Empire, there was vampire outbreaks everywhere. And people were digging up bodies and cutting off their heads and burning them and driving stakes through their heart and everything. And there was researchers and scientists who were listening to accounts from people they knew didn't lie, and they were saying, yeah, we saw this dead man walking, and we buried this guy, and the next day he was walking around and came to the body. And one of the common signs of vampires is that they've eaten their own burial shroud, so their mouth will have like tatters of fabric hanging out of it and blood. And vampires were typically very swollen, like they gained like 100 pounds in just blood, and so they're bloated and red, and they're saying, yeah, we saw this, and so they're writing these accounts. And so Emperor Maria Theresa, she sent her personal court physician to end the vampire attacks, basically. And so he just went with rigorous scientific method and disproved them all, and it ended.
Really?
And it made me really want to write a story, maybe just a short story, right?
Yeah.
I forget. It was like, I think his name was like Gavin or something. But let's say his name's Gavin, right? Yeah, let's say his name's like Gavin Baldwin or something, right?
Yeah.
Just Gavin Baldwin, vampire hunter. And it turns out that he didn't use scientific method and rigorous observation to destroy them. He went around and killed every single vampire in Europe.
Well,
I think that'd be a great little short story.
so both vampirism and lycanthropy, there's actual... It's cases of insanity where both of them happen. So there's... It was in North America, I think it's like the far north of the States. Earlier settlers. Basically, some guy went barmy in the can he made, killed his family, and started like drinking their blood. And so they tried to hunt him down because they realized he'd done this, and like went into his camp, and it's sickening. And he ran away from them barefoot, and like when he fought people, he had the strength of the insane. And he was like attacking other cabins trying to get and grab people, and they ended up shooting him, and he got up and they shot him again, and that's just like adrenaline or something. But he'd been so much like a vampire, they cut off his head and drove a stake through his heart and buried him. And
we have a non-vampire story here in the Yukon of the Mad Trapper.
Yeah.
And...
well, I'm saying, like, there's several stories like this of vampires.
Right, but what just the point I want to highlight is the Mad Trapper was shot something like 10 times.
Yeah.
Like, they kept shooting him and he kept not stopping. So people can just take a lot of punishment as well.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't mean that they're a vampire just because they have unexpected durability.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying, people have durability. It's very vampire-like behaviors, though, like the drinking the blood and all that stuff. And then there's, like, the werewolves, like, people suffer from lycanthropy, the lunatics. Like, there are cases of lunacy.
Sadhguru was talking about, people asked him, can gemstones affect your mood and mind? Can you use gemstones for healing and whatnot? And he said that in India, and I don't know where he's getting this information from, but doctors will tell you, like, especially doctors that work, I guess they still have insane asylums in India or something, they'll tell you it gets a lot more difficult around the full moon. You get people starting to act a lot more crazy.
Yeah.
And just hospitals in general. And he said, and this is true in the rest of the world because of the word lunatic, we know this. And so Sadhguru was saying, and I don't have any verification for this, but the fact that we have the idea of a lunatic in the first place does back it up, like, pretty obviously. We shouldn't ignore the power of how would you put it? The power of the cosmos to affect Earth.
Yeah.
So, for example, solar radiation might actually stress people out. So in a time of high solar radiation, you might have people acting more stressed, feeling more stressed, and...
Well, I think part of the cause of lunacy is... have you ever been outside when it's like a very bright full moon?
Mm-hmm.
And you can see everything even though it's night and there's no like street lights and it's this sort of like cold white light everywhere? It's like completely changes the structure of the night. And the night's usually like you want to cuddle in, you want to like feel warm and enclosed, you want to be contained or by a fire. But the full moon lets you go out at night and it's a cold light, but you can still go out and it's very open. Like, it feels more open than a bright blue sky.
You see with dogs a lot of the time, they get restless during a full moon.
Yeah, and it's really easy to go about, but there's still the dark, so there's still the nature of the dark in the corners of the full moon's light.
So you have... Well, what you could have is the natural desire to be up when it's bright, combined with the fear of the dark, and then you're going to be on edge, and you're going to be acting kind of crazy and strange.
Yeah. Because there's a constant thing with, like, the curse of the full moon. If you ever try to make werewolf scientific, like, there's certain things like, oh, let's make vampire scientific. But if you make werewolf scientific, like, shouldn't the sun turn them into... Like, what's special about bouncing sunlight off the moon's surface? And it has to be the full moon so a large amount. Or is it gravity that affects werewolves? So if, like, a werewolf, I don't know, goes in a deep enough canyon, do they turn into a werewolf? Or
I think... Look, if you want to do, like, a 3 hearts, 3 lion thing, that is an interesting exercise.
Yeah.
But I also think that science is incomplete. So you can have a scientific werewolf because of moonlight, because it is moonlight. We don't know everything. So I heard, I think it was Rupert Sheldrake, he had this description where he said, we tend to look at science as if we understand the big picture and we have yet to fill up the little details. And he said that's not true at all. We have no idea what any of the stuff is. So the reason werewolves are affected by moonlight might be because moonlight has an effect on werewolves.
Yeah. Well, even on top of that, I watched a clip from the Hogfather movie that they did, and it follows the book very closely. And the great line right near the end of the book of what would happen if we didn't save the Hogfather? The sun wouldn't have risen. Instead, a heated ball of gas, a flame gas, would have come up over the town and illuminated the world.
That would imply they were getting at the idea of the human
belief in things.
And belief in things, yeah.
Well, Death even says, take the whole universe and grind it down into the finest powder, and then take the finest sieve you can, and sieve it through, and find me one speck of compassion, find me one bit of honor, find me one part of justice.
Yeah. So you could say that
it's the concept of the moon that turns them into it.
Yeah, I guess you could even make it human, right? You could say that a werewolf has... So, for example, if you eat peanuts and your throat swells up and you die, peanuts have no ability to make your throat swell. What is happening is your body perceives peanuts as an infection, and so they...
send antibodies to the area?
Yeah, they send histamines to the area and your throat swells up and you die. So the werewolf could be stressed or mentally affected by the moon, which triggers their werewolf capabilities.
Yeah.
But you could also have something like the moon is a gravity well of some sort that changes the property of light to become moonlight. Moonlight could be an actual tangible object. Sunlight and moonlight might be distinct entities. The moon could be a barrier that sunlight passes through to become moonlight. The reflectivity could be important.
Yeah. Well, in Dragon Ball, so Saiyans turn to giant apes when they're presented by the planet's full moon. And so they have to look at the moon and it turns them into a giant ape. And they encountered a problem with attacking planets that didn't have moons, or people who knew about their power, and so they would destroy their planets on the moon. And so Goku's father, because Saiyans can produce energy, basically using his energy threw an orb up in the air that lasted, which simulated the moon. And so the Saiyans just throw the moon up even if it's gone, and then they can turn into a giant ape.
And I think we'll leave it there for a day, so thank you for sticking around. Maybe? I don't know. Anyways, bye.